Salmon futures are on the move, Christmas demand is heating up the market, and big shifts in global supply, from Norway to Chile, are reshaping the outlook for 2026. At the same time, concerns over disease, environmental pressures, and even activist campaigns continue to challenge the industry. I'm Johanna Botta, and joining us now to break down the latest price action and what's driving the salmon market is Bertrand Oosterlee, VP of Clearing and Execution Sales at StoneX. Welcome back, Bert.
Morning.
So I want to start with an update on how salmon futures have been trading lately and also what the demand and supply and demand picture looks like.
Okay, so in terms of trading, the focus over the last 2 months has mostly been on the full year 2026 12-month contract. And we've seen prices evolving from 7,560 to 7,670. And more recently, we've seen the price going above 7,600 to reach 7,650. This morning we had an offer at 7,630, which some would say in the fish market is cheap as chips. Most of the price action of late has been on the back of Christmas demand. So after all, Christmas is upon us. So the old saying, it's beginning to feel like Christmas. And that has been mostly the Norwegian battlefield cry to say, we're going to see the festivities bring the price of salmon in NOK in the 90 to 100 per kilogram range over the next coming days. Beyond that, we also had some interest in the second half of the year contract, so the Q3, Q4 contract for 2026. And we've seen a regular offer at 6,950, which seems to be flexible, but we can't find a buyer just yet.
Okay, talk to me about output.
So in terms of Norwegian data we've seen of late, we've had information that the numbers of fish at sea over the past 3 months have fallen. However, the size of the fish have increased. And in terms of harvested volumes, those numbers fell in September but regained in October. And when we look at the export figures out of Norway, they've made quite a few records over 2025, either on the weekly basis, monthly basis. And if I look at one single figure from January to November, they reached 1.44 million tons, which is 13.3% better than the previous season. So in a way, the Norwegians have been saying again and again that there's less fish, more exports, therefore it has to be tighter.
Okay, what about projections for 2026?
So we've seen some analyst estimates for 2026, which point to a biomass growth of 2 to 3%. And that is mostly based on growth in Chile. So Chile is expecting a 2026 biomass record, mostly on the back of higher investments. And the investments have been very much notable in the sense that the Chilean salmon exports are the second national export after copper, for example. And beyond 2026, we also seen some analyst estimates for 2025 to 2033 for Chile, where basically the production is expected to potentially double on investment, but also on higher smolt rates and also improvements in production. And when we look at Norway for 2026, the Norwegians have been less optimistic than the Chileans. They've been telling us that they expect actually the biomass to either stay stable or fall a touch, just because they still have some sea lice issues.
And what about land-based output?
So land-based output is very interesting because most of consumers like you and I have never heard that salmon can be produced out of the sea. But it is a production method that is gathering momentum with land-based producers in Norway, Iceland, the Netherlands, Japan, China. And it is something which is very much on the development side in China. China is heavily investing into its own production, and it's going to be very important for how that production is going to take away some of the Chinese imports of Norwegian origin over the next few years. Now, land-based salmon has been very successful in terms of increasing its biomass. We've had records after records from the firms that have invested in this method. And we've seen an interest in land-based production because basically there's no sea lice. So from a consumer point of view, it's going to be interesting over the next few years if there is a momentum to get something on the label to say whether it's sea-based or land-based. And in terms of quality, people are saying that it is high quality, although if you ask sea-based producers, they will tell you it's not as good, but you know, it's the fight between them. And in terms of criticism, it's been mostly about the cost of land-based production. Many people think that the initial costs were underestimated, especially when we look at the amount of electricity and power that is required. Now, having said that, generally speaking, the comparison between sea-based and land-based so far has been for a fish on the land-based side, which are generally making lower records in terms of weight.
Okay, so we've talked about output on the land and the sea. What about demand?
So demand has been mostly, according to the Norwegians, about China. So China sees continued growth in demand, and it is very specific about the type of demand. It's 60% what is called home demand, so it's you and I, rather than industrial demand. So there's hope that the Chinese demand is going to continue to grow, and that's the Norwegian argument to say that prices can only go up. Now, having said that, the other element to consider in China is the growth in the number of filleting companies. So the Norwegians are saying if there's more filleting processes, that means there's going to be more demand. But the bears in the market would have mitigated that by saying that, careful, over the next 2-3 years, land-based production in China is going to increase, and therefore some of that filleting capacity will be for domestic production. Now, when we look at some figures, the Chinese buying of Norwegian origin in September were up 68% compared to the September of the previous year. In October, it was 99% higher, and in November, it was 47% higher. So it's quite a significant market for Norway. In a way, also, China came to the rescue of Norway because it created more demand at a time when the US were putting their tariffs and were looking more at Chile, and also at a time where European demand was reported to be slightly slowing down, albeit recently for Christmas. Then when we look at other type of demand information we've had, in the UK, 1/3 of all fish sales are salmon, and it represents a huge market, some £1.5 billion. And another bit which was interesting over the past 2 months, there was a UK delegation to India for a trade deal, and the salmon industry made sure that salmon is being discussed in India, and that could open to another vast potential demand market.
So you always refer to, when we talk about salmon, about the good, the bad, and the ugly. Can we start with some good news? Okay,
so there's been some very good developments in terms of lice. I know you hate the relationship between lice and salmon, but it is a major issue in the salmon industry. And a few research laboratories have worked together, and they are saying that they may be close to a lice vaccine. So that could be very good news. So why is lice so important? It is a major issue. It costs $1 to $1.4 billion to the industry per year. Also, it is an issue in terms of how people report. For example, in Norway, 4 to 5% of locations are in breach in terms of lice infestation. So it is a very important topic. When we look at what it does to salmon, it is more important for white salmon in the sense that it affects the maturity of the fish. So normally you would expect a salmon to go back to the river to spawn after a year. If the maturity is delayed, the first year they don't come back. So they would come back on year 2, year 3. So it does affect wild population. Now, until we have that vaccine available, tested, safe for the environment, there are other methods which are in place, and we've spoken about them in the past. There are, for example, the use of additional other species of fish like cleaner fish, wrasse fish that come and eat the sea lice on the salmon, or also putting some essential oil into the feed compound in order to minimize the attachment of lice by up to 2/3. There's been also some developments from researchers on the complex gill disease issue. So complex gill disease, what does it mean? It means that if a fish gets sick around its gills, it moves less, it feeds less, it is more at a risk of dying. So some recent research has developed monitoring elements for farmers to better manage the issue and make sure that we get better survival rates from this. In terms of other positive developments, there's been a antibiotic coming out from Tasmania called florfenicol. That antibiotic is a great development in terms of managing mortalities. It is to fight one of the most severe bacterial infections, and it has been proved to be harmless to the environment, seabed and wide populations, and also to consumers. So that's a brilliant recent research development. We also had some developments in various parts of Europe from producers and from processors who look at using the aquaculture residue in terms of vertical integration of revenue by looking at developing biogas, fertilizers, or feed compounds. So that again is better for the environment overall. We also had one development in packaging, which was quite interesting. So one of the major players was often fined in Norway per truck at a significant amount, some 25,000 NOK per truck, because of what we call runoffs. So what are runoffs? It's basically your crate of fish that leaks, and that leaking product comes to pollute. So the development of late has been to create a new crate, which is better for the keeping of the fish in the crate, but also to basically absorb those runoffs.
So obviously there's a lot of good news when it comes to vaccines and the scientific side. What about AI?
So AI has been very much at the forefront of recent developments in the salmon industry. Whether we look at AI on farming sites, so with automated feeding, with sorting fish per gender, automating and making the vaccination line a bit easier. And when we look at the processing side, it's been about remote control, centers, but it's also been about automated filleting machines. So overall, the industry has been praised for the AI development and the AI use in terms of reducing the environmental impact. It has slightly been criticized for loss of jobs, though. And when we look at other good news, that's one from NOAA, so one of the fish regulators in the US, which came to say that they've made a study over the past 25 years, and it's been very encouraging. They looked at 28 endangered salmon species, and over the past 25 years, instead of going into extinction as it was feared, they've actually abundantly rebounded in terms of population.
That's a great way to end on the good news. All right, give me the bad before you give me the ugly, because I don't think I'm ready for that yet.
So on the bad side, I'll start with the wild fish campaign, which is called Off the Table, and which is supported by some 50 chefs. And they've made a special announcements for Christmas, trying to entice consumers not to use farm salmon for Christmas, because they see salmon as bad for the environment, reducing wild populations, for example. Also, nutritionists have slammed salmon for being 5 times more hazardous than wild salmon when it comes to the source of animal feed. So the consequence of what does the fish eat. Another bad news that came to the market was a fish welfare scandal. So in an open water pen, some fish were left to be with sea lice disease and were not cleared away quickly enough. The environmentalists got news of the issue and made it quite public. And so one UK producer lost its royal endorsement. Some consumer chain reacted by saying, we're not buying from Scottish producers anymore on the back of it. We're going to buy from land-based producers instead. And one smoking company also was criticized by environmentalists by saying, you're still buying from this firm. So it's been a little bit of a scandal. Then we also had some news about misleading labeling, where a chain was, a smoker was mentioning that the labeling was more or less giving indication that it was salmon caught by a fishing line, so therefore potentially wild, when actually the other set of the label was indicating that it was farmed salmon from various origins. So that again is going to call regulators to have a better labeling overall in the industry. And then we also had some bad news about barbed wire jellyfish. So it is something which is important because it did cause some 3 million fish to die in Norway in 2023, for example. And in 2024, it caused the lowest survival rate since the 1980s. So at present, when we look at barbed wire jellyfish, there is low occurrence, but the Norwegians, having been so badly affected in the past, have called for an international effort between the producing areas, such as the UK, Iceland, the Faroe Islands and Norway, to monitor and to better warn if there is a potential issue.
Okay. I think I'm ready for the ugly. That was almost really ugly, but give it to me. What's the ugly side?
So on the ugly side, it's going to be ugly. So first of all, there's been some research reports stating that there may be a shortage of feed meal for fish or for salmon in general, and that would be due to a diversification into other meals, and therefore the industry has been trying to push for more insect-based fish meal to be developed. And the reason why people would want to have more non-soybean meal fish-based feed compound is due to the fact that it's been criticized, for example, during COP30, for being one of the elements that contributes to deforestation in Brazil. Then in terms of other elements, we had one scandal on price fixing allegations between Norwegian and Scottish farmers. So that again made the ugly news. And also there was some counterfeit illegal labels being used in Norway for export of diseased fish. So again, not so good for the reputation of the industry. Another ugly topic is mortality rates. So we've been mentioning over the past records that mortality rates have year on year fallen, for example, in Norway. But when you look at the figures, it's still 12 million fish. So it's been a hot topic of criticism from the environmentalists and from the fish welfare people. High mortality rates are due to various causes. It can be winter ulcers, bacteria, toxins, it could be plankton outbreaks, thermocline inversions, sea lice infestation. So it's quite a complex cause to effect in that sense. But to make matters worse, the environmentalists have slammed the industry for sometimes failing to report on time or failing to report at all. And also we've seen the environmentalists pushing for accountability, i.e. if you have high mortality rates, you need to pay. And I think that the environmentalists are really pushing for that solution, saying if we start to make the producers pay for high mortality rates, it's going to hurt them where it hurts the most, which is basically revenue. So I think that regulators will look at this eventuality. And also some environmentalists have simply said, well, let's close those farms. The farms that are with a high mortality rate should simply be closed. Now, the industry has reacted by saying that it's not everywhere. So, for example, the Faroe Islands have defended their industry by saying that they've had the best survival rate on record this year. And the Irish as well have, and the Scots have mentioned that they've had some very decent survival rates over the past at least 9 months of the start of the year. So there's been a kind of duality between attack and defense from the industry. There's also been the issue of farm escapes, and we had a big one this year when Storm Amy hit, and some 75,000 farmed salmons escaped into the wild. So why is farmed salmon escape so important? It's because it creates an opportunity for farmed salmons to commingle with wild salmons. And there was a scientific research recently that's established that 2/3 of wild salmons have got some genetic signatures from farmed salmon. So there is definitely commingling happening. Also, the environmentalists have said that they are looking to pressure regulators to close the farms that have
high mortality rates.
And also those escapes, or simply to remove those farms totally in order to safeguard wild populations. Now, the industry has also reacted by saying that those farm escapes were localized because of storm Amy to a certain area. Other areas in the world have had improvements in terms of farm escapes. And also the industry has pointed to various incentives that have allowed in parallel the conservation of wild salmon. And finally, on the ugly side, it's something you're not going to like, but basically there's been quite a few articles about contamination. So the EU has put out a note on the concerns about forever chemicals, and for salmon in particular, there's been 2 reports as well that have mentioned that road salt and road tires leave chemicals or particles on the ground, which is then washed away by rain, goes into streams and may affect wild salmon populations.
That was all actually pretty ugly, I have to say. Even the good stuff was salted with a little bit of ugly stuff in there. Okay, so can you then, Bert, walk us through how StoneX helps commercial firms hedge price risk in this market?
We've been present in the salmon futures market for just about a year now. And what we offer is naturally clearing and execution on ESF, so Euronext Salmon Futures. But our offering goes beyond that. And it's been something that we've looked at with the clients that we've onboarded so far and the prospects that we have. We've realized very quickly that there is not just a need for salmon hedging, but a vertical need for hedging. And that vertical need for hedging is what we can offer, which is FX. So if you have a euro NOK, euro dollar, euro GBP exposure, but also global payments. So I've mentioned it in previous recordings. If you sell your salmon to Poland, you might have to pay somebody in zloty to move that salmon for you. So there is a local currency payment requirement. We can cater for this. And beyond that, the vertical hedging element is also the power and the gas oil. So why the power? Because a land-based producer will use a lot of electricity, a processor will use a lot of electricity. We can help those market participants hedge their power requirements. And when it comes to gas oil, if you are a salmon exporter, you naturally have a fleet of trucks. So gas oil comes as a cost. So you would want to look at hedging that cost. And it's the same for the processors who then need to export the processed fish to the final consumer chains.
And you forgot great depth of information.
True. And also, for the moment, we've focused on listed derivatives, but we'll also look in the near future to potentially look at OTC products in salmon and all the products I've mentioned.
Okay, now time for salmon trivia. Give it to me.
Well, I've promised it, so I've got to deliver some salmon trivia that's going to be either interesting, funny, or freaky. So on the interesting element, the paleontologists in Alaska have discovered a fossil which is 73 million years of age, and it is a salmonid. The actual researcher's name for it was Sylvinus Alaskensis. So you can use that on your Christmas dinner while you're having
I'm going to use
smoked salmon. Then on the weird side, in a way, we spoke about AI earlier on. AI will be used on loudspeakers to scare sea lions and seals in river mouth to try to prevent them from preying on salmon.
I love that. I'm going to use that. Okay.
Then on the funny side, if you take your phone and go on YouTube or other short video channels, you can look at Miss Norway going into her pageant in a salmon costume. On the weird side, we had a news from Toronto. The world first, a plant-based salmon fillet was created. So for those who don't want to look at sea lice and so on, you can have a plant-based salmon.
Pescatarians, okay.
Exactly. Then one for the people who don't like wrinkles.
Oh, that's me. Okay, what?
There's been some development in the use of salmon sperm for direct injection for high collagen treatment.
I'm pretty sure Kim Kardashian was already onto that.
And then a technology firm found out that when you look at the salmon residues, so the fins, the bones, the eyes, whatever we don't consume, they have a much higher proportion of vitamins, exactly.
Yeah.
So they are going to be used to create vitamins tablets, high in omega-3, for example, collagen, and other vitamins like vitamin D.
Okay, that's environmentally friendly.
Yes, and it's taking some of the waste away. And one last one for you, the freaky one. The Norwegians have made some research on crossing pink salmon and Atlantic salmon. They were successful in raising one fish to maturity. It was not it was sterile. It was not a producing salmon, and it was very quickly condemned to be Frankenstein salmon.
Oh, I was going to say, I thought it was going to become the cavapoo of salmon.
Absolutely.
All right, Bert, thank you so much. That was so interesting. I'm definitely going to use 2 of those in my Christmas dinner chat. And thank you guys so much for watching. For more financial content, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel.